Now is John Kartsonas, founder and managing partner at Breakwave Advisors, a firm specializing in shipping and commodity investments. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to have you joining me on NYC TV Live this morning.
Thank
so
you
good morning,
me.
right?
Yes.
So what do you think our audience should know about BW LPG's place when it comes to the shipping industry?
Well, obviously one of the largest gas players in the world when it comes to shipping. I think the most important thing to think about shipping is China, right? This is basically, has been for decades now, the main driver of demand. So when you think about LPG, that's also the case here.
Yeah.
The other big thing, I think, is that the US market, which for decades was an importer of energy, whether that's oil or gases or so on, is now a net exporter. And when you look at the distances involved between US and China, because that's basically the main important trade here, this is much bigger than historically has been between the Middle East and Asia. So you think about volume and you think about distance, and that the combination of the two gives you a market where demand is growing much faster than the actual supply of LPG.
Obviously, economic factors play a huge role in this. And you know, in the company's recent SEC filing, it listed a series of trends, which I talked about earlier in the show, that actually determine its success, such as conflicting conflicts overseas, demand in the US, the geopolitical situation that we're seeing unfold. And also what's happening in the Panama Canal, obviously, is playing a huge role. So what factors do you think will ultimately impact the company most?
I think right now what you have in shipping is the perfect storm.
Yeah.
Two of the most important waterways, the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, are facing significant issues. Obviously, we know what's happening in the Red Sea with the Houthis, and you know, the transit through the Suez Canal have dropped significantly. And then you have the Panama Canal, which is a weather issue. You don't have enough water, you didn't have enough rain, so actually ships that are trying to transit the canal are going much slower and less ships. So the combination of these two is creating an environment where demand across the shipping sector, including the LPG, is actually increasing much faster than what people were expecting last year. And I think that's very important.
And let's talk about inflation rates. Obviously, everyone has been anticipated the Fed to be dropping rates. However, they keep postponing it, keeps pushing it. So how do you think this will impact the shipping industry?
Well, I think it's the other way around. Think about it. Shipping for a decade was in an environment of very low rates. Nobody thought about higher transportation costs, which means inflation. Today, you have higher transportation costs, higher quality in terms of transportation, and that is pushing prices up. And in this process, pushing inflation up. So I think this is something that people should keep in mind when you think about shipping and inflation.
And what do you think investors should be on the lookout for when the Fed finally do drop those interest rates? How will that impact the shipping industry?
You have to look what shipping is doing at that point in terms of freight rates. I mean, you can't be in an environment where we have experienced that in years now, right? Where something happened in shipping and people talk about inflation. So if the Fed starts to lower interest rates, maybe we'll have to think about what happens down the road in terms of shipping.
And you know, earlier when you joined us this month, you explained how investors are beginning to pay more attention to the major events happening around the shipping industry. So how do you see this behavior continuing to evolve?
So I think we're in a different environment. Like for the past decade, shipping didn't matter. Now it matters because, as you said before, it brings up inflation, not only in the US, but globally. So you have to think about transportation costs, about the global supply chain, and how this affects our everyday living, our goods that we buy every day.
What do you think are the biggest factors right now that should be weighed more heavily than others?
I think obviously economic growth, especially out in the middle, in Asia, like China. And the second thing is what happens with the two canals we talk about, the Panama and the Suez Canal. This is creating disruptions, creating delays, and that's basically is throwing the balance off in terms of freight rates.
Now, you know, this is the third company in the BW group to list here just in the past few months at the New York Stock Exchange, joining the long list of over 2,400 listed companies. So, you know, we saw Catalyr in December, Hafnia earlier this month. Shed more light on how transactions like these will impact the overall market and how they actually transpire.
Well, it goes back to what I said before. Shipping is becoming a much more important part of the global economy. Investors realize that they want to invest in these sectors, and companies like us, because BW Gas, are bringing basically the opportunity for investors to invest in the sectors.
All right, well, thank you so much, John. I'm getting word right now that they're on the trading floor about to sign the Distinguished Guest Book, but it's always great having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.